let's turn to another major crisis caused by the Biden administration. In May, Border Patrol tallied a record number of migrant encounters, 239,000 in just 1 month alone. The situation is so dire that multiple Texas counties, listen to this, have now formally declared this crisis an invasion. Joining us now with more is Fox News contributor Sara Carter, along with the president of the National Border Patrol Council, Brandon Judd. Okay, so now what we've got, Brandon, and I'll start with you, is that by declaring it an invasion, several of these counties in Texas, and I believe in Arizona as well, believe that under their constitution, that declaring it an invasion allows for the states to then engage in a situation where, without the approval of Congress, they can make it, take it upon themselves to actually handle those immigrants and return them to Mexico. What say you?
Yeah, this clearly shows how bad the states are feeling right now as far as the crisis goes. These counties are not Republican counties. If you look at two of them, Val Verde and Maverick County, they're Democrat counties. And they clearly know that they are shouldering the burden of everything that's going on as far as illegal immigration goes. They have to deal with all the drownings. It's not the federal government that steps in and takes care of those bodies. It's the counties that have to do it. They have to deal with all of the drugs that are coming in. It's not the federal government. It's the counties. They have to deal with the crime. They know that this situation can be controlled, but it's going to take the White House's support to get it done, and the White House just isn't doing anything about it, so the states are now having to step in. They're having to look at how they can exercise their authorities under the Constitution, and I'm hoping that the states are willing to do everything that they can and let it go to the courts. Let the courts determine whether or not the states can, in fact, do this. As long as they do what they can, it will shine the spotlight on what needs to be done.
Well, you know, you have to give Attorney General Mark Brnovich some credit for this. He read the state constitution, and he read it as opening up a number of potential legal avenues that can certainly be ruled on by the courts. But Sara Carter, you've been at the border for years. I visited the border many, many times. What is different about the border during Joe Biden's administration compared to other administrations?
Well, it's run with absolute impunity as far as we're dealing with the drug cartels. I think Brandon can attest to that, or the human trafficking organizations. It is wide open. Our Border Patrol agents, their hands have been tied behind their back. They don't have the authority they once had. Basically, President Biden just overturned every single executive order that was put in place by President Trump. That really was the first time in my time covering the border, Judge, that I actually saw action being taken on the border that was actually effective, where people remained in Mexico, where people were being able to be returned back, where the drug cartels and the human traffickers knew this was the end of the road for them. As soon as President Biden came into office, he announced that the border would be open once again. He allowed people to come through. Just last month in May, 55,000 gotaways. That's what they estimate. Gotaways, known gotaways, came into the country. Those were people that were not apprehended. And think about this, over 800,000 since President Biden came into office. That's unheard of. And another factor that I think is really important here, and we got to give credit.
Sara, excuse me. I've heard a lot more than 800,000. We had 300,000 last month.
Oh, absolutely, but that's known gotaways. That's just known. That's just people they know have escaped into the country. And you're absolutely right, Judge. And over 500 deaths just this year alone of migrants, not even including the 100,000 Americans that have died with drug overdose.
Well, in fact, as it relates to that, Brandon, the United Nations has issued a declaration that the deadliest area in the world is the area between from the Central American countries to the United States. They basically say this UN migration study deems the U.S.-Mexican border the deadliest land route in the world based on the 2021 numbers. They're not even at the 2022 numbers.
Yeah, we're the greatest country in the world, and you would never know it by those figures right there. And what we're seeing is just complete and total chaos, and it's a disregard from this administration. Let's hope that Congress is willing to step up. Let's hope that Congress is going to pass laws that close all of these loopholes, because we know that this administration isn't going to do it. You know, we need people that are in Congress. You're going to have somebody like Jim Layman who's going to be on, who would be willing to close everything that we need to get done. If we have the proper legislation, we can do it. If we had policy, if this White House would actually give us the policies like President Trump did, as Sara Carter alluded to, we could control what's going on. We just can't do it under this White House right now.
Right. And as I said, Sara Carter, Attorney General Mark Brnovich was the one who came up with this idea of basically creating a situation where a state can engage in defensive actions within its own territory or near the border caused by these transnational cartels and gangs.
100%. Attorney General Brnovich has done an incredible job. You know, he's being sued right now by the Biden administration, basically saying that, you know, the Biden administration doesn't want people to have IDs to actually vote. He's like, take me to court. Let's go all the way to the Supreme Court. And I agree with him. And I think that's what we need. We need more people like him, more people like Ken Paxton, the Attorney General, more people that are challenging this, because we can do it. And it's actually very important for the American people to understand this is not just the border, Judge Janine. We have so much fentanyl pouring across that border, but it's coming across the country. It's killing our young people. It's killing our citizens. We also have people being migrated across this country, and that is on the taxpayer dime. That is on taxpayer dollars, and it is a national security issue with over 50 people connected to known terrorist organizations that we have apprehended at that border. This is a serious crisis. It's one that is the responsibility of the President of the United States and the executive branch. That is their main authority. The main authority given to the executive branch and to the President, the Commander-in-Chief, is to protect U.S. citizens, and he's not doing it.
Exactly. Sara Carter, Brandon Judd, thank you so much for being with us this evening. And
hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.